So to manage stakeholder engagement, we use three tools and techniques. Again, all these three tools and techniques is nothing new, and we have seen this before in the other processes, which are communication management knowledge area, where the communication methods that are used, the interpersonal skills of the project manager so that he can manage the stakeholders, and the management skills that the project manager needs to have. So these are all the skills that the project manager need to have to be a successful project manager, to manage the team, to manage the stakeholders, to manage the whole project. So let's see the first one, the communication method, as to how the project manager is going to communicate with the stakeholders. The method of communication identified for each stakeholder in the communications management plan are utilized during stakeholder engagement management. And that's why we got the communication management plan as an input over here. The second one is the interpersonal skills. The project manager applies appropriate interpersonal skills to manage stakeholder expectations, which are, for example, building his trust, building the stakeholder trust, resolving conflicts. If there are any conflicts between the stakeholders or the project team, then he should use the resolving conflict interpersonal skill to do that. Active listening, which is extremely important as a project manager, because most of your job, 80 to 90% of the job that project manager does is communication. So he should not just be able to just talk, he should be able to communicate, where he is able to listen as well. And he has to listen actively, because that is very important when it comes to stakeholders. So active listening is an important interpersonal skill that a project manager should have. The fourth one, overcoming resistance to change. A project manager really doesn't like change. So he has to overcome the resistance to change, because change is something that is inevitable. It is going to happen no matter what. So you should overcome resistance to change. The third tool and technique to manage stakeholder engagement is the management skills. Obviously, you're managing the stakeholders, so you should have management skills, which are, for example, presentation skills, how you present to the stakeholders, how you negotiate with the stakeholders, what are your writing skills when you're talking or emailing the stakeholders, and public speaking, because you're doing all these presentations and you have to talk in front of all these stakeholders and team members. Management skills is the act of directing and controlling a group of people for the purpose of coordinating and harmonizing the group towards accomplishing the goal. Example, facilitate consensus towards project objectives, influence people to support the project, negotiate agreements to satisfy the project needs, and modify organizational behavior to accept project outcomes. So I hope you followed the 4 tools and techniques to manage stakeholder engagement. Again, we've done this before. It's really easy, but make sure this will be there for the exam. The reason why I keep saying this, because for PMBOK 5 they added a new knowledge area, which is the stakeholder knowledge area. So there are going to be a few questions on this new knowledge area. So once we use the inputs, apply the tools and techniques, we get a total of 5 outputs. And most of the outputs that you see over here are updates. Why? Because we are just managing stakeholder engagement. So The first output is organizational process assets updates, which include stakeholder notifications, how we notify the stakeholders, project reports, how we send the project reports, project presentation, how we present them, project records, feedback from the stakeholders, and lesson learned from managing stakeholder expectations. So this is one important output out of all the ones that you have, and obviously even change requests, because while managing stakeholders you are going to have some changes. So how are you going to manage it? So again, organizational process assets updates, where stakeholder notifications, project reports, project presentations, project records, feedback from stakeholders, and lesson learned from managing stakeholder expectations. Second one, change request also includes corrective and preventive actions. Project management plan updates. Now anything is updating over here, so you have to make sure that you have to go and input that in the project management plan as well. Then the issue log between managing the stakeholders, just like the issue log between managing your project team. So there is going to be a separate log for managing the stakeholders. The last output is project document updates, where you're going to update a few documents, which is the issue log, the stakeholder register, which was from identifying stakeholders, stakeholder management strategy. This is an update as a result of addressing concern and resolving issues. So this strategy you have to update as well, because other project managers can use in the future how the stakeholders were managed from the previous projects, and that would help them. So that's done with the third process, which is managing and executing process group, and the process was manage stakeholder engagement. Let's jump to the last process in the monitor and control process group, and the process is control stakeholder engagement. Again, that's why the color red, because we are monitoring and controlling them. Again, when we come to monitor and control, like a lot of the other processes, some common inputs are project performance data, common outputs are work performance information, change requests, project management plan updates, project document updates, organization process assets updates. As I keep saying all the time, when you are in the monitor and control, you will have a lot of outputs related to work information, change requests, and updates. So just make it easier for you to remember. And work performance data is always an input. So to control stakeholder engagement, what we did over here is we managed stakeholder engagement. We planned stakeholder management, then we manage the stakeholder expectation, and once we manage them, after we manage them, we control the stakeholder engagement. For inputs, project management plan, issue log, work performance data, project documents. We know what these two are. Let's jump to the work performance data, which includes data including reported percentage of work complete, technical performance measures, start and finish dates of scheduled activities, number of change requests, number of defects, actual costs, and actual durations, etc. So we have to make sure that the stakeholders are engaged throughout the project, and that is important for a successful completion of the project. If the stakeholders are not engaged, or if they don't give you the time because they are so busy all the time, then your project can fail. So You have to make sure, first of all, how to manage them, and second of all, how to control their engagement and make sure they are engaged throughout the project. So the fourth input here is project documents that we are going to use to control stakeholder engagement, and these documents include the project schedule, stakeholder register, issue log, change log, project communications. The three tools and techniques we use to control stakeholder engagement is information management system, expert judgment, and meetings. Again, this is nothing new. We have already used these three techniques before. In information management system, it provides a standard tool for the project manager to capture, store, and distribute information to stakeholders about project cost, schedule progress, and performance. Example, table reporting, spreadsheet analysis, and presentations. The second tool and technique is expert judgment, and the third, meetings. And the meetings over here are status review meetings, which are used to exchange and analyze stakeholder engagement. Now, this status review meetings are mainly for one reason, and that is to control the stakeholder engagement and make sure and analyze the stakeholders are engaged in the project. Used to exchange and analyze stakeholder engagement. If for some reason the stakeholder is not engaged, we have to try to make sure that the stakeholder is engaged in this project so that we avoid the project from failure. Again, 5 outputs, nothing new over here. Work performance information is circulated throughout the project communication, which is maybe weekly or bi-weekly. It depends on what goes in the communication management plan and how we are going to communicate with the project stakeholders, what tools are we going to use for communications. Are we going to email them? Are we going to call them? All that. Example, status of deliverables, implementation, status for change request, like as in a stakeholder requested a change. So what's the status on that? We have to communicate it to them. If the change is being implemented, if the change is not being implemented, what's the status on the change request by the stakeholder? So we have to communicate that to them. And forecasted estimates to complete, as in how long is it going to take from right now to finish the project as to where we are at right now. So we use the forecasting technique and apply the formulas to find the forecast estimates to complete. Change request, which is recommended corrective and preventive actions to bring the project in line with the project management plan. Project management plan updates, again, which includes the updates to change management plan, communication management plan, cost management plan, human resource management plan, procurement management plan, quality requirement, risk, schedule, scope, and stakeholder management plans. Project document updates, which is updating the stakeholder register and the stakeholder issue log. The last output is the organizational process assets update, where you update stakeholder notifications, project reports, project presentations, project records, feedback from stakeholders, and lesson learned documents. So this is important, and that is the feedback from the stakeholders while during the process of the project, as well as when the project is complete. So feedback from stakeholders is important, and that goes in your lesson learned documentation for future projects. So that finishes all the 4 processes which were involved in the knowledge area of stakeholder management. And next thing we are going to look into is some of the templates that could be used in stakeholder management knowledge area. One of the templates is the stakeholder register. Then we can look into some more templates, which is maybe work performance information. So let's look into it right now. So the first one which we will see is the stakeholder management strategy template, where we have an introduction, identify stakeholders, key stakeholders, stakeholder analysis. Now remember, we did this in the first process, which is identify stakeholder, where we're doing the stakeholder analysis. Introduction. This section should introduce and discuss the goals and objectives of stakeholder management strategy for the project. Effectively managing stakeholders is a key component of a successful project management and should never be ignored. Proper stakeholder management can be used to gain support for a project and anticipate resistance, conflict, or competing objectives among the project's stakeholders. Identifying the stakeholders should discuss the methodology the project team will use to identify stakeholders and how stakeholders are defined. It is imperative that all stakeholders are identified regardless of how major or minor they are. This is because they will be categorized after they are identified. If stakeholders are omitted, there is a likelihood that they may become evident at some point during the project's life cycle and introduce delays or other obstacles to the project's success. Great care and effort should be dedicated to this step of stakeholder management strategy. Key stakeholders. This identifies the subset of stakeholders who have been identified as key stakeholders and the reasoning for determining that they are key stakeholders. Key stakeholders are often those who potentially have the most influence over a project or those who may be most affected by the project. They may also be stakeholders who are resistant to the change represented by the project. These key stakeholders may require more communication and management throughout the project lifecycle, and it is important to identify them to seek their feedback on their desired level of participation and communication. Stakeholder analysis. This section describes how the project will analyze its list of stakeholders. This discussion should include how stakeholders will be categorized or grouped, as well as the level of impact they may have based on their power, influence, and involvement in the project. There are several tools and techniques that can be used to help quantify stakeholders. The description of these tools and techniques should also be included in this section. The chart below will be used to establish stakeholders and their level of power and interest for use on the power interest chart as part of the stakeholder analysis, where we have the key A, B, C, D, E, F, G, organization, they're into operations, they're suppliers, they're trial customer, engineering department, their names, their power, 1 to 5, their interest, 1 to 5. So where you see more power, more interest, you have to make sure that you concentrate more on them. So this is another example of the power and the interest grid. We already saw one example right here. So it's similar to that. So you can see A, B, C, F, D, E, G, where they lie according to the keys over here. So there are different ways of putting that in, and it's up to you how you input them in the power and interest grid. Then the stakeholder analysis matrix will be reviewed and updated throughout the project's duration in order to capture any new concerns or stakeholder management strategy efforts. Now we have the stakeholders, their concerns, their quadrant, as in which quadrant do they fall under. Remember these quadrants? These quadrants 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the strategy. Communicate project specifications as required. They need minimal effort, concerns, ensuring proper handover of the project to the operations team. That's for stakeholder A. Same thing goes with the other stakeholders and what their concerns were and what's the strategy to fix their concerns. Again, the sponsor accepts, signs, and dates it. Let's go take a look at the issue log. Now this issue log can be used with the project team, with the stakeholders, whoever you're trying to manage. And this is a sample of the issue log, which shows the issue, the description, what's the priority of that issue, the category of the issue reported by who, the issue is assigned to who, the status of the issue, date resolve, resolution, comments. This is one simple sample of your issue log. Okay, again, and this issue log is with respect to something that's happening in your project, but again, you'll have an issue log with respect to your stakeholders or your team members. Now let's see some more sample templates. We have the project performance report. Again, we've already seen this one as well before. Reporting project performance is key function of successful project management. The project team and stakeholders must be kept well informed on project status at regular intervals throughout the project, as well as when there are any changes that are made to the project. There are many project characteristics which can be included in project performance report. Some of these include analysis of project performance, to date, risk, and issue status work completed during the current reporting period, next reporting period, significant accomplishment, forecasts, variance analysis, and project changes. Again, there's no standard format, and the project manager should meet with the project sponsor and key stakeholders in order to agree on a format that will be implemented. Again, this is an example of the report, performance report. What element are we working on? What was the plan value? What was the earned value? What was the actual cost? What was the variance, cost variance, schedule performance index, and cost performance index? And this is what we would send to the stakeholders on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis as agreed upon. We'll even talk about the current status of risks and issues that are pending, significant achievements, work to be performed in the next reporting period. There was one project change identified. If there was any changes that were identified, we put that in. The forecast estimate at completion, which is EAC and ETC. Budget at completion, which is BAC. And that is your performance report sample. Now let's go take a look at the change request. There's a change request that comes from the stakeholders. That's how it is. Change request forms are primary project management tools used for requesting any changes to a specific project and are one piece of the project management process. So if the stakeholder just calls you and asks you to do a change on the project, even though if it is a really simple change, what do you do as a project manager? As a project manager, you have to ask the stakeholder or whoever is requesting the change to fill in the change request form and send that in. Once that comes in, the project manager is going to look at the form, see what the change request is going to, how it's going to affect the project. He's going to analyze it, and then it sends to the change control board, who will review it and either approve it or deny it. So you have to follow the process with respect to change request. You cannot take changes over the phone. They have to follow the whole process that is used by the organization. If the change is approved, all project documentation must be updated accordingly and the change must be communicated to all stakeholders. Some changes may also require rebaselining of the cost, schedule, or scope. Now this is a sample of a change request template. Change request, the project name, date, change requester, who is requesting this change number, change category, what is going to be affected with this change. You're trying to change the schedule, the cost, the scope, requirements, resources, testing, quality, and etc. Does this change affect what? Does this change affect, check all that apply, which is corrective action, preventive action, defect repair, updates, others. Describe the change being requested. Describe the reason for the change. Describe all alternatives considered. Describe any technical changes required to implement this change. Describe risks to be considered for this change. Estimate resources and costs needed to implement this change. Describe the implications to quality. Disposition, approve, reject, or defer. Justification of approval, rejection, or deferral. Then change control board, who are involved in the change control board, their name, their signature, and the date. So that is an example template of how a change request template looks like. Now let's go see the last template that we have is the project status report template. Again, project status summary, which needs to be sent to the client on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. Percent complete. How are we doing with respect to scope, schedule, cost, risk, quality? What are the variances? What are the schedule performance index, cost performance index, work completed last week, work planned for next week, any of the issues that are currently open and what's happening with those issues. Is there any progress on those issues? Any of the risks that are open and likely to happen in the future, and what are we doing with those risks? Deliverables and the milestones. Are we within the deliverable times? Are we going to reach our milestones? Are we going to miss our milestones? Again, you see the milestones, deliverables, WBS, planned value, forecasted, actual, and the status. So we plan to finish this. This is where we are, what we forecast to do, and this is what we have right now, and this is the status for that. Open change request. Use this section to track all changes to the project and report the status of those changes. Track of changes start with the request for the change. We just saw that one before this slide. Tracks the approval status and ends when the change is added to the project. The project plan and schedule update, and it has become the part of the project. So the change request name, change request number, requested date, and the current status of the change request. Where is it at right now? Right now it's in the review by the change control board. Then the second change request that they receive, change request number, change request date, and the current status is it has been approved and being added to the project plan. Then key performance indicator, which is the last one, mainly the SPI, the CPI, the cost variance, the schedule variance. If the project is ahead of schedule, the project is behind schedule, the project is over the budget, or if the project is under budget. Many managers turn right to this section as it provides a clear view of the status of the project according the earned value metrics. In your project, you need to decide which metrics to monitor, but be sure not to include too many, as you may end up providing the same information but in different forms. So mostly we like to track the schedule variance, schedule performance index, cost variance, and cost performance index in the layout before by keeping it simple. And that finishes all our chapters and all our 47 processes that we used and learned in my lectures. I hope you had no problem understanding, but again, you have to spend a lot of time, go through the lectures, maybe a couple times if you can. And I wish you the best for your exam, and I hope you do really good. So this is Tutor Ali, and thank you for watching. And if this videos help you, be sure to tell your friends and your colleagues. Thank you. Bye.